Okay, this process has not been particularly fun nor easy. And just trying to get this message out, it has been absolute hell. I keep getting pushed to get it out and to just share myself, but everything keeps coming in between it. So here I am to discuss something that I've been wanting to discuss for quite some time. But my process wasn't fully complete, and I just didn't feel validating these things until the process was complete. I don't know how most people would go about anything like this, but okay. What is a woman? What is a woman? What is a woman, and what is a trans woman? Because I don't know. I'm pretty sure I'm both. Also, I'm a trans man. This is why a lot of this stuff does and doesn't make sense. It is an extremely personal thing, these definitions. And the things that are extremely personal about them aren't definitive, but we tend to feel like they are. So like it's a struggle when you have an emotional experience and a physical experience, and those are already competing with each other or contradicting one another. And on top of it, the reality in which you exist also has opposing concepts that it's trying to force upon you. Everything gets convoluted and fucked up, and that's why our society is the way it is. Most of the people that you might deem mentally ill in a way that like means that they're somehow at all less valuable is just not valid, because this society we live in is sick far more than the people. The people are fucking sick, but it's not just one individual that's so awful. It's that society itself has become this sick, right? And why? I have a lot of my own opinions. I would like to leave that for another time. This time I would like to be very specific and concise, and I'm already 3 minutes in and have yet to say anything of value. Jesus fucking Christ, why is this so difficult? Why is it so difficult? Why is it so difficult to be honest? It's not that it's difficult to be honest, it's just that like it isn't one simple thing. It isn't just one little thing that I can be like, okay, this is what it is and everybody's understanding. No, everybody's off in their own fucking little worlds, not understanding shit about dick. So I have to explain myself, because otherwise people just assume that things are the way they're being told that they are. Because people are insane. People are literally absolutely out of their fucking minds, incapable of being like thinking for themselves, of having their own fucking experiences. Like, I'm so frustrated. It's not this, it's everything. It's internal. I have an internal frustration with this. Why is this so difficult? I have a lot I want to say, and I don't know how to say it. And I don't know how to go about any of this. But I've not been honest with myself in a way that has caused me to not be honest with everyone else. There's a part of my subconscious that is like well aware that that's what I was doing, which is what makes it hard to admit to, because I was hiding it from myself, and suppressing myself because I thought that's what was best. I thought I was doing the right thing. And it's not that I wasn't. When I look at things in a divine timing aspect, I mean, it's perfect. Everything's exactly how it should be, and everything lines up, and it's beautiful, and it's wonderful, and it's a miracle. I don't know why it's so hard for me to be able to express these things, knowing that it seems like it's, for me, it's been a lifetime. For me, it's been everything. I know sorry. Jesus. I know that this is something so simple, and like so simple. Like, this is like, people should be laughing when they hear this. I do hope that people take it as a joke. I obviously have so many like personal feelings, but this is something that's like, I mean, because of the way I've gone about it too, it's like so obvious to other people, and like it's not gonna seem like it's like a big thing. At least I hope. I don't know. I don't expect it to necessarily change the way anybody thinks about me or anything like that. I'm doing this for myself, but I don't know. I don't know what people think of me. To be honest, I don't care. I don't know. It's been my whole life. I've worked for this. And I didn't always know even that that's what I was doing. I knew in my heart, but I couldn't always see clearly. I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of stupid things to get here, just to validate where I'm at in that way. I mean, I don't have any regrets, but I would have made different decisions, I think, had I have gone through things again. Yeah, I probably would have made different decisions at the same time. If I know what I know now, because then I'd still be able to remember these experiences, and then I'd be able to experience new experiences on top of them. And knowing what I know now, I do think I'd be able to do better. For sure. At the same time, I'm looking at things, in the perspective of a grander reality, and everything is exactly how it should be. This is divine timing. This is the right time. I don't mean to be so emotional about this. It's making it weird, because that's not how nobody wants to watch this shit. It's fine. Okay. So I've had gender dysphoria my entire life. Pretty sure I was born with it, because I've had it since I was cognitive. And it was incredibly exasperated and exploited my entire life. We didn't know that that's what it was. I didn't get diagnosed with that. I know now in retrospect. We didn't talk about things like that. Society wasn't as progressive as it is these days by any means. And I grew up extremely sheltered in a traditionally conservative, Christian family. So I really didn't have access to information that would have made any of this make sense. And I was very confused growing up. Especially just because, growing up, we didn't grow up with psychology. We grew up with religion. And so what I was taught wasn't, okay, so how is it that you feel, and how can we work through that? And, how is it that you want to feel, and what can we do to make sure that you're sure of yourself as a person and as confident in yourself as possible, and that, you can go out into the world and be your own individual and be successful as an individual. It was the exact opposite. The intent in the way that I was raised was to train me to be a housewife. Period. Like the whole point of me being a woman, the whole reason I was raised by my stepdad and my mom, but the whole reason that my parents, were given a girl was so that they could raise her to be the perfect servant for some man eventually. That's the mindset, the way that I was raised. Both my parents are misogynistic. They really don't have too many qualms about it. My mom makes a lot of excuses for the behavior and then actively like acts that way. Like she really, and then she'll make jokes about it. Like to people that she's comfortable with, she'll let you know her actual feelings about things. And, you know, she is misogynistic, and a lot of it comes from like her own self-worth issues, you know, and to her own trauma and stuff like that. But both of them, both her and my stepdad together, like their views are largely just traditionally conservative. You know, they're, you know, good old Christian values. You know, women aren't capable of thinking for themselves. It's not that they're not capable, it's that they shouldn't think for themselves. Women should be submissive. Women aren't here to like go live their lives, you know, as individuals, gaining their own successes, improving themselves to themselves. They're an object for men to be able to continue to build on the society that they're developing. Essentially, you know, so having gender dysphoria at such a young age and having it not being recognized, it wasn't that it wasn't recognized. I mean, anybody that knew me would tell you that I swore I had a dick, that it was just weird looking and that my balls hadn't dropped yet. And I was very adamant about being a guy. I always felt like a dude. I would make a lot of jokes about it and stuff like that, but mostly just because I was confused, because I felt like a dude, but was continuously being told that I was a girl because I have a vagina. And it just didn't make sense to me, because to me, I was like, that I'm not talking about this. Like, I'm not even talking about a dick. Like the fact that guys have always been so obsessed with their dicks that that's what makes them a man was always so weird to me. Because like, I knew my dad was a man without ever seeing his dick. You know what I mean? Like it was never about my brother's dicks to me that they were boys. There was something different. There was the ways that they were being treated socially. There were expectations that they had. There were ways that they were naturally that I didn't tie directly into being affiliated with their dick. I do know that physically and psychologically, we are so intertwined that so much of our natural inherent human behaviors are reflections of our reproductive systems and desires. But I also know that like as sensible sentient beings, we don't need to define ourselves by such shallow standards, especially when they're not as truly definitive. Not when we've reassessed things the way that we have, where we've broken things down even further. You know, we just keep breaking things down. It is the degradation of society. It's the breaking down of things. But it's to understand it. You know, it isn't some evil, terrible thing that's happening like all the Christians would make you think. That the whole reason that evil exists, it's literally just the way that the world works. It's the way it always has worked. It's necessary. There comes a point where society develops, and to such a degree that it needs to completely reevaluate itself, which means taking all of the shit out of the closet, pulling it all out of its boxes, throwing away all the shit that we don't want anything to do with, and then realigning all of the things that we do. It just feels evil when you're in your personal emotions about it. You know what I mean? Oh, poor pitiful me. I have to be destroyed so that life can continue. Like, people are so selfish. Anyways, so yeah, I was raised in such a way that it just exacerbated the gender dysphoria because I never felt valid as a girl. That was my issue. My issue was that I felt like a boy that wasn't being validated as a boy ever. But because I felt like a boy, I never felt like I was truly validated as a girl. I also was a tomboy, so I was never the most feminine. I mean, I played with dolls. I played with Barbies. I liked Lisa Frank, you know, all the rainbows and stuff like that. Like, I liked little girl stuff and acted like a little girl. I just didn't feel that way. And those things are fun. Those things are fun for everybody. Little boys like doing that stuff too. Like, it wasn't, but I didn't feel, I wasn't sexualizing those things. You know what I mean? That way when I was little. To me, when I was little, what mattered was how I felt and what I was being told how I needed to be, regardless of how I felt. So it's a weird thing for me because I was raised, it didn't matter how I felt. It doesn't matter if you feel like a boy. You're not a boy. You're a girl. It doesn't matter if it hurts your feelings that you can't run around with your shirt off. You are different than the boys are. And it did hurt my feelings to be different. And it did hurt my feelings to not be able to be allowed to do all the things that the boys were, and to not be a part of things like they were, and to not have a relationship with my dad like they did. A lot of it was deeply, deeply internalized daddy issues because my bio dad died when I was born, and being raised by my stepdad, I always felt like, not having my dad dying when I was born, I took a lot of that personally. I always felt guilty for like causing his death. Most of my childhood felt like that deep way. And then I also just like didn't feel like I could gain my stepdad's. I wasn't daddy's girl, like, and my stepdad treated me like that, but I just never felt like I could truly gain his acceptance, the way that my brothers could. The thing was that like I tried to be as perfect of a child as possible. Like, I really did try to be a good kid. I really was a good kid. My brothers could act like idiots and do things that we had explicitly been told not to do, and do all of these things that went against the religion that we were being taught in church and school. And my parents all thought that it was funny. And it was something where like, my brothers they didn't run the household because my stepdad was always like a very strict disciplinary, but things kind of revolved around them in a way. At least in my perception, that's how it was. They always said that everything revolved around me. And I think in part they felt that way because like what was happening was that they were being taught and trained and allowed to be their own individuals that were experiencing their own lives and had all of those things. And I was being trained how to be a housewife. So there was a lot more attention being given to me, but it was controlling attention. It wasn't like fun attention. Oh, me getting to know myself and being able to be myself and getting to have fun. It was me compromising how I feel about who I truly am as a person in order to appease these standards that I'm expected to uphold to. And I didn't get the chance otherwise. It wasn't, my parents tried, I think, their best to, try to kind of push those limitations so that I could still express myself in different ways as a girl, but it just, that wasn't how I felt. And it was a struggle. I grew up in Christian schools and going to churches where we always had to wear skirts. I always hated it. I always hated having to dress like a girl. I always hated having to dress like a girl until I was in my teens. By the time I was in my teens, I had been forced into it so much that my rebellious attitude kind of took this, and I remember doing it. Like, I remember being 15. I was probably about 15 when I decided, I think it was the summer, maybe right before I turned 15, that I decided that I was going to accept the chains and then turn them into something, like make them my own, because then I wouldn't feel so oppressed. And so then I started choosing to wear skirts, and I started like finding different skirts that I did actually like wearing. And I started wearing skirts pretty exclusively actually for a couple of years, for several years even. Actually, a friend of mine just brought up the other day how he always remembered me wearing mini skirts. And that was coming out of a point of always wearing skirts, choosing to always actively wear skirts. And then when I was about 18, 19, when I was 19, I started trying to kind of step into that feminine sexuality. So, it started wearing skirts and dresses started playing a different role. But yeah, so it was, about 15, and then I was able to start wearing makeup at about 16 or 17. And I liked to play with those things. I liked being able to portray myself more feminine than because when I was growing up, like, my mom would always dress me like a girl, and I was always forced to wear skirts and stuff like that, which wasn't something I would have chosen for myself. And I did look like a girl, But I never felt like that because it wasn't something that was coming from in me. It wasn't my own choice. So it didn't resonate. By the time I started making the active choice myself to start presenting myself that way, it did become validating. And so I fell into the same ruse that pretty much all 16 to 22-year-old girls fall into, of my entire personality and identity revolving around how to make boys find me attractive. Only I also really struggled with, weight issues and insecurity about that. Being fat or chubby at all has always been like a self-protection method. Just been sexually assaulted and abused and raped so many times that not being able to not feel so desirable at any given time feels safe and feels secure. But there's a part of it where now I'm like, it just holds me back because there's things I want to do with my life where I don't want to feel insecure about my appearance that way. And I don't want to, I want to be healthy and I want to look my best. And I don't want to be hiding underneath these layers of protection, So I'm learning and I'm struggling and I'm going through these things. I start portraying myself as a woman. By the time I lose my virginity at 17, start having sex. I was already a porn addict by 12. Always a pervert. Always drew porn, naked people before I even ever had seen porn. I was exposed to sexuality at a very young age. So a lot of it was a hyperfixation on the sexual experiences that I was already inundated to, like blowjobs. I was obsessed with them from an extremely young age. But a lot of that compulsive sexuality was a stimulation for my masculinity, my sense of masculinity. And as I got older, it continued to be validating in that way because most women aren't perverts and like that. They aren't naturally so prone to the visual stimulation of porn, to becoming addicted to the visual stimulation in that way. They don't find the same comforts in sexuality that men tend to. So what I found by the time I was, 17, 18, 19, it started having sex, it started doing, just pursuing a feminine sexuality, was that the parts of me that felt naturally masculine were the things that men liked about my feminine sexuality. It was more just because it wasn't feminine, really. They didn't have to treat me like a woman. They didn't have to respect me. They didn't have to treat me like a friend. They didn't have to be nice to me. I was just another dude, since I had a vagina, I wanted to use it, and I liked dick. Boys liked dick, so it, felt. I kind of did, I started feeling kind of, and I didn't express these things openly. I openly acknowledged myself as a woman having heteronormative relationships, or actually I considered myself bisexual because I'd been with girls and always liked girls. I was very confused. But mostly because of how deeply because of gender identity, if things wouldn't have been so strict, if I would have just been allowed to feel how I felt, I probably wouldn't have been so confused because I wouldn't have felt like I had to define myself by my feelings. But nonetheless, I was very confused. I lost my virginity at 17, was with that boy for a year, and then we separated, and then I was celibate for a year, and then I had a straight hoe phase, and I slept with, I think, 12 people the year that I was 19. And most of them were one-night stands in the middle of the day. But I dated a couple people at that time, and yeah, I started to feel essentially like a dude, like a guy friend. I was like the cool guy friend because I was the one that I'm a little obnoxious because I talk more than any of you want to talk, and I want to text more or whatever than any of you want to text, and I talk about stupid shit that none of you want to talk about. But I am funny. It was always fun to hang around with. I was pretty much down for anything, so I was cool to hang out with. And I had a pussy that I was willing to use. Not with my friends. It wasn't like I had guy friends that I was just fucking. My guy friends were my actual friends. It was just that I engaged in so much casual sex because I was not connected and in alignment with my vagina by any means. I didn't see it as like a part of myself like that. It was a tool, it was an object. I was an object. I didn't see myself like a person at the time. I very much struggled with my identity and the ways that it affected my sexuality. And I dealt with my sexuality because of traumas, and it affected my identity. And, I just was a big confuddled mess. And I went to a 12-step program when I was 21 for, I was 20, maybe 20, for sex addiction, for my porn addiction, mostly because my porn addiction had just become so compulsive and disturbing. So I went to a 12-step program. I went for 6 months, and I traded that for monogamy. I thought that maybe if I just had a healthy sexual relationship, then I'd be fine. However, monogamy doesn't equate to healthy sexuality. It doesn't just inherently denote that. And the relationship that I found wasn't the right one for me. I ended up getting married, and then we got separated. But even in all that, I was still so much of that insecurity that was driving me, so much of that self-loathing and that low self-esteem was directly the effect of my gender dysphoria and not recognizing it, not being aware of it. I didn't know. I honestly didn't recognize it as that until I was in my late 20s. I had gone through a lot. I went through an incredibly abusive situation in 2015 for the year, which changed me fundamentally. And it was coming out of that too. Yeah, I definitely, I was more in alignment than I'd ever been with my physical form, and more dissociated from my sexuality than I'd ever been at the time. And that was a good space to be for me at the time, because I really did need to be able to see myself separate from those things. And coming out of it, I mean, it was a bitch, and that's a story for another day. But coming out of that, I did find a lot more confidence in myself as a woman. It always felt like that the man inside of me, the me that feels like a man, always felt like an insecurity. But it was that way because I couldn't physically validate that I was a man. So of course, every time that I felt like a dude, it didn't matter how much I tried to portray myself like a woman and try to feel like a woman and was validated as a woman, I didn't feel that way. So I always felt very just insecure, because I felt like I was never adding up, even when everybody was completely valid with me, completely, they saw me as a woman, they accepted me as a woman. I didn't have to feel like I needed to keep up anymore, but I was still struggling. And I didn't know that that's where that insecurity was coming from. I just never felt good enough as a woman. And, at this point I started working very hard to rid myself of a lot of that jealousy and bitterness that I had, because I found that I had become hateful towards women out of jealousy, just because I never felt like I could compete with them. I never felt like them. I felt like every time that I had close girlfriends, I just never felt like we were the same thing, or I never felt truly connected with them. So at that point I was like, okay, that's my problem. I'm a grown woman. I don't have any solid female relationships. I'm acting like a cunt to women. I don't want to be this way. So I started working out those jealousies, and it completely changed the way I went about relationships, the way I viewed romance, and the way I viewed myself. I'd liked women at different times and stuff before then, but now I actually appreciated women and respected women, and I make plenty of jokes that I don't, but that comes from a self-loathing. I really do care for women, and I found I just never resonated with being one. But I was always trying so hard to. And so, I don't know. By the time I was in my late 20s, I started to really feel I started to accept that I was a man and that I was just living as a woman. And I was fine with that, because that's what I had grown accustomed to. But I considered that I was likely just a trans man that wasn't seeking surgery or hormone therapy. And I was like, okay, so for the last 5 years I've been actively accepting myself as a homosexual trans man that, portrays themselves expresses themselves. What's the word? I express myself I don't, because I express myself as a dude too. There's a way, the physical, I appeal to the feminine binary, right? To the female binary of this is what a woman's supposed to be like. And and my dysphoria it does. There are times that I'm incredibly uncomfortable with having breasts, with having a vagina, with having this female form. And it feels very like I'm lacking because it feels like I should have a male form. But I've learned to just accept it, that as me. That's just me. That's what it feels like to be in this skin. To be comfortable in this skin means to accept that there's